Hello students, in today's session let us discuss about the Montreal and Kyoto Protocol and Convention on Biological Diversity. First we will know about Montreal Protocol. The Montreal Protocol on substances that deplete the ozone layer was designed to reduce the production and consumption of ozone depleting substances in order to reduce their abundances in the atmosphere and thereby protect the Earth's fragile ozone layer. The treaty was originally signed in 1987 and substantially amended in 1990 and 1992. The Montreal Protocol stipulates that the production and consumption of compounds that deplete ozone in the stratosphere, that is chlorofluorocarbons, halones, carbon tetrachloride and methyl chloroform are to be phased out by 2000. Scientific theory and evidence suggests that once emitted to the atmosphere, these compounds could significantly deplete the stratospheric ozone layer that shields the planet from damaging UV radiations. For each group, the treaty provides a timetable on which the production of these substances must be phased out. It is believed that if the international agreement is adhered to, the ozone layer is expected to recover by 2050. Due to its widespread adoption and implementation, it has been hailed as an example of exceptional international cooperation, with Kofi Annan quoted as saying that perhaps the single most successful international agreement to date has been the Montreal Protocol. It has been ratified by 196 countries. Since the Montreal Protocol came into effect, the atmospheric concentrations of the most important chlorofluorocarbons and related chlorinated hydrocarbons have either leveled off or decreased. Halone concentrations have continued to increase as the halones presently stored in fire extinguishers are released, but their rate of increase has slowed down and their abundance are expected to begin to decline by about 2020. The Montreal Protocol currently calls for a complete phase out of HCFCs, that is hydrochlorofluorocarbons, by 2030. The year 2012 marked the 25th anniversary of the signing of the Montreal Protocol. Next, we will learn about Kyoto Protocol. The Kyoto Protocol is a protocol to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, that is UNFCCC or FCCC, aimed at fighting global warming. The UNFCCC is an international environmental treaty with the goal of achieving stabilization of greenhouse gas concentrations in the atmosphere at a level that would minimize dangerous anthropogenic interference with the climate system. The protocol places a heavier burden on developed nations under the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities. The Kyoto Protocol entered into force on 16th February 2005. 192 parties have ratified the treaty to date. Under the protocol, 37 industrialized countries called as Annex 1 countries commit themselves to a reduction of 4 greenhouse gases, namely carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, sulfur hexafluoride and 2 groups of gases like hydrofluorocarbons and perfluorocarbons produced by them, and all other member countries give general commitments. Annex 1 countries agreed to reduce their collective greenhouse gas emissions by 5.2% from the 1990 level. Emission limits do not include emissions by international aviation and shipping, but are in addition to the industrial gases CFCs, which are dealt with under the 1987 Montreal Protocol on substances that deplete the ozone layer. The protocol allows for several flexible mechanisms such as emission trading, the clean development mechanism and joint implementation to allow Annex 1 countries to meet their greenhouse gases emission limitations by purchasing greenhouse gas emission reductions credit from elsewhere. Through financial exchanges, projects that reduce emissions in non-Annex 1 countries from other Annex 1 countries or from Annex 1 countries with excess allowances. Kyoto is intended to cut global emissions or greenhouse gases. The objective is the stabilization and reconstruction of greenhouse gas concentrations in the atmosphere at a level that would prevent dangerous anthropogenic interference with the climate system. The objective of the Kyoto Climate Change Conference was to establish a legally binding international agreement whereby all the participating nations commit themselves to tackling the issue of global warming and greenhouse gas emissions. The target agreed upon was an average reduction of 5.2% from 1990 levels by the year 2012. Contrary to popular belief, the protocol will not expire in 2012. In 2012, Annex 1 countries must have fulfilled their obligations of reduction of greenhouse gases emissions established for the first commitment period, that is from 2008 to 2012. There are 5 principal concepts in the Kyoto Protocol. They are: the first one, commitments to reduce greenhouse gases that are legally binding for Annex 1 countries as well as general commitments for all member countries. The second point is implementation to meet the protocol objectives to prepare policies and measures which reduce greenhouse gases, increasing absorption of these gases, for example, through geosequestration and biosequestration, and use all mechanisms available such as joint implementation, clean development mechanism and emissions trading, being rewarded with credits which allow more greenhouse gas emissions at home. The third point states that minimizing impacts on developing countries by establishing an adaptation fund for climate change. The fourth point is accounting, reporting and review to ensure the integrity of the protocol. And the last one is compliance by establishing a compliance committee to enforce commitment to the protocol. Next, we will discuss about Convention on Biological Diversity. Biological diversity is the term given to the variety of life on earth and the natural patterns it forms. The Convention on Biological Diversity entered into force on 29th December 1993. It has 3 main objectives. The first one is the conservation of biological diversity. The second one is the sustainable use of the components of biological diversity, and the last one is the fair and equitable sharing of the benefits arising out of the utilization of genetic resources. Some of the many issues dealt under the convention includes measuring the incentives for the conservation and sustainable use of biological diversity, regulated access to genetic resources and traditional knowledge including prior informed consent of the party providing resources, technical and scientific cooperation, education and public awareness, provision of financial resources, national reporting on efforts to implement treaty commitments. The agreement covers all ecosystems, species and genetic resources. The convention reminds decision makers that natural resources are not infinite and set out a philosophy of sustainable use. While past conservation efforts were aimed at protecting particular species and habitats, the convention recognizes that ecosystems, species and genes must be used for the benefit of humans. However, this should be done in a way and at a rate that does not lead to the long term decline of biological diversity. So, in this session we have learnt about the Montreal and Kyoto Protocol, then Convention on Biological Diversity. Hope you have got a good insight on some details about the various protocols. Until we meet again, bye.